All right, let's dive into something that's been sparking a lot of debate lately. Race and gender swapping in movies and TV. We got a really interesting article from one of our listeners that tackles this head on, and I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic these days. It seems like everywhere you turn, there's another classic character getting reimagined. It really makes you think about how we see ourselves represented on screen and what it means to update stories for a modern audience.
Okay, so first things first, what are we actually talking about when we say race and gender swapping?
Well, simply put, it means taking an existing character, someone like James Bond or Hamlet or even a Disney princess, and giving them a different racial or gender identity than they had in the original.
So it's not just about casting a black actor to play a traditionally white role, for example.
Exactly. It goes deeper than that. It's about exploring how that shift in identity changes the character's story, their motivations, their relationships. It can even impact the overall themes of the whole movie or show.
And I've seen a lot of arguments for why this is a good thing. What are some of the biggest pros that you've come across?
The biggest one is representation. For so long, Hollywood has been dominated by white male stories. So seeing someone who looks like you on screen, especially in roles that have historically excluded certain groups, can be incredibly powerful. It's about feeling seen, feeling like your story matters.
It's like finally seeing yourself reflected in the stories you love.
Right. And it can have a huge impact on younger generations, too. It shows them that they can be the hero, the villain, the love interest. It opens up a world of possibilities that might have felt closed off before.
It's not just about creating more diverse roles, though. I've also heard the argument that race and gender swapping can actually breathe new life into old stories.
Absolutely. We all have those beloved classics that we keep coming back to. But sometimes they can feel a bit stale, a bit out of touch with modern values. So reimagining those stories with a more diverse cast can make them feel fresh and relevant again.
Like taking something familiar and seeing it from a whole new angle.
Precisely. It's not about erasing the original, but rather adding another layer of meaning, another interpretation. For example, imagine a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but with a Romeo and Juliet from different cultural backgrounds. Suddenly, their forbidden love takes on a whole new dimension, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. Their family's prejudices, their struggle to be together, it all resonates in a different way.
And that's what's so exciting about this. It's about finding new ways to connect with these timeless stories and discover new layers of meaning within them.
And we've seen some really successful examples of this in recent years. Hamilton, for example, blew everyone away with its diverse casting. And it wasn't just a gimmick, it genuinely added something new and powerful to the story.
Oh, absolutely. Hamilton proved that you can take a story deeply rooted in history and reimagine it in a way that feels both authentic and groundbreaking. And then you have something like Doctor Who, which, after decades of male doctors, finally introduced a female doctor. And you know what? It worked. It showed that even long-running franchises can evolve and embrace change.
So there are definitely some wins here. But our listener also sent in an article that brought up some valid concerns about race and gender swapping. What are some of the potential downsides?
Well, one big concern is that it can alienate fans who are deeply attached to the original version of a character. They might feel like their favorite story is being tampered with, especially if the character's original race or gender was central to their identity.
And you can see how that could happen. Like
Yeah.
if you grew up loving a particular character, seeing them reimagined in a way that feels jarring or inauthentic could be upsetting.
Exactly. And it raises the question whether these swaps are truly about representation or just a way to appease a wider audience, you know? Like, are they just checking a box instead of genuinely trying to tell diverse stories?
Right. That whole idea of tokenism definitely comes up a lot in this debate.
And another valid concern is that sometimes changing a character's race or gender just might not make sense for the story, especially if the story is deeply rooted in a specific historical or cultural context.
Yeah, it feels like there needs to be a real reason for the swap, not just a random change for the sake of it.
Right, it needs to be organic to the story, it needs to serve a purpose, and sometimes it might make more sense to create new diverse characters rather than trying to force a change onto an existing one.
So it sounds like there's a lot to consider here. It's not just a simple yes or no answer.
Definitely not. It's a complex issue with valid points on both sides. But if you ask me, the most important thing is intention. Is the change being made with the goal of telling a more authentic, more inclusive story? Or is it just a superficial change for the sake of appearances?
So what are your final thoughts for our listeners as they grapple with this topic?
I would say be critical, be engaged, but also be open-minded. Don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions about what a character should look like or how a story should be told. And think about how these changes make you feel. Do they enhance the story? Do they make you question your own perspectives? Ultimately, that's what good storytelling is all about.
I love that. And here's a final thought for everyone to ponder. Imagine your favorite movie villain, but instead of seeing them as the bad guy, imagine their origin story, their motivations, their struggles, their pain. Could race or gender swapping change how we see that character? Could it even make us empathize with them? It's definitely something to think about as we continue to explore the ever-evolving world of storytelling.